I remember when I first started to play the clarinet. I took pride in having been able to put the instrument together with the keys all lined up and putting the reed in place without any help. It was a whole new world for me when I was finally able to play a note without first hearing that obnoxious squeak of misguided air. As the sound of middle C filled the room, I told myself and the world that I could make music. But as a young kid who had no previous musical training, who only understood music as an outside observer, I did not realize then that music was so much more than one note. It wasn't until I could play the clarinet that I realized that a note is just a note, but that music comes in the melody, in the narrative that is formed when tunes and phrases weave together to tell a story, not just in words, but in feelings and emotions that ebb and flow as the piece grows. Melodies that shift and move and return to themselves and then to silence, even as the music continues to play on, in hearts and in minds and in souls. And so it is with grief. Unless you are of the blessed few who have not been touched by the reality of mortality in your life, you will know that grief is so much more than one note. It is so much more than one single moment of loss. Like music, the themes and emotions of grief carry through, ebbing and flowing and returning suddenly, taking us off guard and meeting us in unexpected moments. Like music, grief is a story, one that is shared by each of us in different ways. Today is All Saints. It is a day in which we remember all those who have passed from this life, and it is one of the very few days that we take as a community to grieve. As you listen to the music and the readings of the gospel, you will hear a story of one person's grief and the grief shared by a community. You will hear the story of Jesus, in whom all human experiences come to bear. I hope that as you meet grief in your life, on this day or on days to come, that this story will give you strength, knowing that in it, you are not alone. Tuesday morning, early. You're up and dressed, but just barely. Today is a big day. One kid has a piano recital and the other one has a baseball game. You're going to have to blow off that dental appointment once again because you've been asked to represent the boss at a large company gathering. The kids are fighting over the bathroom and the dog is refusing to come in from outside. The milk that you've already poured over your oatmeal has gone sour and it's only 6:30 a.m. You're going about the business of just trying to get your day started. And then the phone rings. "Hey," says sister on the phone. "Mom is really sick. I think it's different this time. Can you come? Can you come now?" "I don't know," you respond. "Mom's been sick for a really long time. And I have to do this thing at work. I know that if I don't do it, I'll lose that promotion that I've been working on. I think this is probably just another false alarm." "Please," she says, "please come." And Jesus was across the Jordan, traveling with his disciples. He and they were only 20 miles away, but running for their lives from those factions who would see them dead. They had a mission to attend to and priorities that were seemingly hard to overcome. But then that call came. Mary and Martha, family to Jesus, called and said, "Lazarus, the one whom you love, is ill, even to the point of death. Will you come?" But Jesus did what was unthinkable for one who was so distinguished, so empathetic, so compassionate. To Mary and to Martha and to his dying friend Lazarus, he said no. "My mission in this moment is much too important to set aside. I cannot come right now, for if I do, it will all be lost." Jesus made a choice. We all make a choice. We decide whether we'll pick up the phone. We decide whether we'll make that journey. In the anticipation of grief, we prioritize and decide. And in that decision, there is no right or wrong, only different. We left Jesus across the Jordan. He sat there waiting and knowing of Lazarus' failing health. He had heard the impassioned plea of Mary and Martha, but it took him 2 days before he responded to the women's call to Lazarus' bedside. We can only imagine what those 2 days were like. 2 days of knowing that Mary and Martha were there with Lazarus. 2 days of Jesus knowing that he could not be there with them, that his mission in this world, that his future would suffer if he were to go too soon. But then he did come. And when he did, he came running. He came, perhaps against his own better judgment, at great personal risk, and certainly against the wishes of the disciples who were gathered around him. The community forces were telling him not to go. Lazarus is sick. He's merely sleeping. You've got other priorities, bigger fish to fry. You have to take care of yourself and your future before you go tend to your friend. Many will hear that very call in our own lives. The cultural pressures that tell us that we must set aside the ultimate moments in the lives of our family and friends so that we might take care of our own needs and fulfill the expectations and obligations that others have of us. The boss says you must decide between your job and caring for your ailing parents. The friends that tell you to get over and move on from the loss of your child. The society that fails to recognize the deep agony that comes from the loss of a close friend. Jesus' strength to stand in opposition to those forces is admirable and even enviable. And yet his strength is not strength that you and I might carry. And yet we carry it as a community. Together, it is our communal strength to share. For just as it was the disciples who questioned Jesus' risky journey to Lazarus' bedside, it was also the disciples who said, "We will travel with you, and we will not abandon you in your time of need." May we each have such a community in our lives, one that would travel to the ends of the earth and back when we need them to. Imagine that walk. That walk from across the Jordan to Bethany, where Jesus was greeted by Martha, not in public, but in private. Imagine what Jesus must have been thinking and feeling, and imagine the thoughts and emotions of his travel companions. They had left the region for their own well-being, a respite from the persecution of those factions who wanted to kill them. And now they were heading right back into their territory. John's gospel refers to these factions by the general name, the Jews, in a literary attempt to villainize an entire people. But it really was just one specific few, or a specific few, who were irked by Jesus' pesky habit of saying and doing things that would upset the status quo. Jesus and the disciples knew that they would not be welcome when they arrived. Jesus was and had always been a black sheep. He was different and he wasn't ashamed of it. But like most black sheep, he must have caused some significant family drama, and drama that becomes acute in times of crisis. Perhaps this is why Martha didn't greet him publicly. Perhaps this is why Mary didn't even show up when he first arrived. What exactly were they going to say to him? Jesus, we love you for all that you are. We believe in you and we trust you. But we have another community around us, one that has been grieving with us while you were absent, one that loved Lazarus and one that loves us. It's a community that stands in complete opposition to all that you say and live out. Jesus, your very presence here is contrary to who they are. Though John's gospel would have us villainize the Jews, we cannot forget that they were there. That this faction that so represented all that Jesus stood for, so resented all that Jesus stood for, that they could set aside their anger and their hatred and show compassion for Mary and Martha in their time of need. They were there. Now we can also not forget that Jesus was the one who also gave them that time and that space to grieve with Mary and Martha. It was, for this community, a momentary time out. It was a pause from all that divided them. And so too may it be for us, that we may trust in our times of deepest need, that we may be united in compassion for one another, and that with such compassion in death, there might also be compassion in life. The poet John Irving writes, "When someone you love dies, you don't lose her all at once. You lose her in pieces over a long time. The way the mail stops coming, and her scent fades from the pillows, and even from the clothes in her closet and drawers. Gradually, you accumulate the parts of her that are gone. Just when the day comes, when there's a particular missing part that overwhelms you with the feeling that she's gone forever, there comes another day and another missing part." Grief is not just the loss. It is all that leads up to the loss and all that follows it. It is a process, but not one that can be fit into a neat and tidy box. It can be an ever-present force that touches you in every moment of every day, or it can sneak up beside you as a faint whisper in your ear until it is a deafening racket. No one is immune from grief, though it might present itself to each of us in different and unique ways. It is natural and it is human to grieve. Even Jesus, the one who is said to be divine, is deeply human when he is grieving the loss of Lazarus. So stoic he has been, focusing on the matters at hand, focusing on the future. What does Lazarus' death mean within the bigger picture? How might the best be made of a bad situation? Up to this point, Jesus has been the perennial intellect. He's a businessman. He's like the sibling who takes care of the bills and the house, who would make all of the arrangements, but would not cry. And yet there comes a moment, surrounded by a grieving community, that Jesus is forced to set aside his stoicism. There was that moment, almost out of nowhere, when the grief welled up in Mary and moved beyond her, and touched the grief that Jesus may have sought so hard to repress. Though he accepted the loss of Lazarus, and despite the absolute faith that he had in his strength to overcome it, Jesus felt for Mary, empathetic to her sadness, and he felt for himself, for the loss of his friend, whom he deeply loved. Jesus was not less for his public grief. In fact, it was in that moment that the factions who hated him finally saw him as human, saw him as one who loved, and with him, their enemy, there was understanding. And here the story of Jesus and his grief departs from that which can be real for us. Would it be that we were able to revive all those that we love from the dead? Would it be that we could keep all those whom we love by our side forever, never dreading that moment that they will slip away from us, to be left hoping that we might be united with them once again? Jesus' resurrection of Lazarus can be felt as a cruel dream, one so unattainable that our faith may be rocked. If Jesus and Mary and Martha can have Lazarus, why can't I have my love? But try as we might, as strong as our faith may be, we cannot bring all those we love back from the dead the way that Jesus brought Lazarus back. But despite this, there is hope. For when Lazarus was raised, he was not completely raised by Jesus. Even Jesus could not conquer death entirely on his own. Around his hands and his feet and his face, the bondage of death still gripped Lazarus. It was not until Jesus uttered the words, "Unbind him and let him go," that those who gathered moved to unbind Lazarus from the burial shroud. And Lazarus was finally able to be free. For Jesus' resurrection was the easy part. The hard part for Jesus and for us is the unbinding. It is knowing that our loved ones are not confined to death. They are not bound by that eternal fate, but that their memory lives on. Just as Lazarus is felt to be free and known in the world, so too are our loved ones. And so we unbind those who we love. We rebirth them in the sharing of memories and laughter and love, in their names spoken aloud, and the whispers of all that we say and do. Amen.